In the 1800s, under the wide prairie sky, where silence stretched across the land and every shadow whispered of danger, a cowboy named James made a choice that would change his life forever. He didn't know it at the time. He thought he was just setting another trap, just another day of surviving. But destiny was waiting, not in the form of a wild animal, not in the form of a bandit or outlaw, but in the form of a young Apache woman. The trap snapped shut with a sharp, metallic bite. James had been hunting for food, checking his snares along the edges of the rolling plains. But when he rushed forward, expecting to find a rabbit or coyote, he froze in disbelief. Caught in the cruel teeth of his iron trap was not an animal at all, but a young woman. Her dark hair spilled across her shoulders, her eyes fierce as fire, and her lips pressed tightly together to keep from crying out. She wore the patterns of her people, the Apache. And her trembling hand clutched a crude knife, though she was too weak from pain to use it. For a moment, James stood motionless. Every story he had heard about the Apache came flooding into his mind. He had heard the warnings: they are warriors, proud and dangerous, enemies of settlers and cowboys. Fear coursed through him. He could walk away, leave her there. Or worse, finish the job, ensuring no revenge would come. That was what some men in town would expect. But then, her eyes met his. Not with hatred, but with something unexpected. Pain. Fear. And beneath it all, a plea, a human plea for mercy. James dropped to his knees. "Hold still," he whispered, though his voice trembled. He carefully pried open the trap, metal groaning as it released its grip. The woman cried out softly, clutching her bleeding ankle. For a long moment, the two of them just stared at each other, caught between worlds of mistrust. He was a cowboy, alone on the prairie. She was Apache, alone and wounded. By all logic, they were enemies. But in that fragile silence, something else began, something neither could quite explain. He carried her back to his camp, though she resisted at first, striking his chest weakly with her fist. "Don't fight me," he said gently. "I don't mean you harm." His voice carried the weight of truth, and though her eyes still burned with caution, she stopped struggling. He wrapped her wound with a strip of cloth torn from his own shirt, built a small fire, and placed water in her hands. She drank, never breaking her gaze from him, as though waiting for the moment he would betray her. But that moment never came. Days passed. At first, the woman, whose name he learned was Ione, spoke little. Her trust was fragile, built slowly with each small act of kindness. James cooked for her, tended her wound, and gave her the last of his tobacco to ease her pain. He never asked her to explain how she had come so far from her people. He didn't press. He simply listened when she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, broken at times. She told him of her village, of the soldiers who had raided, burning homes and scattering families. She had fled, but in her escape she had wandered into his trap. James felt his chest tighten with shame. He had cursed the world for being cruel, for robbing him of family and leaving him a lonely wanderer. Yet here before him was someone who had lost far more, and still carried herself with pride. One evening, under the glowing light of the prairie moon, Ione asked him why he had helped her. He could have killed her. He could have turned her over to soldiers. James stared at the fire, searching for words. "Finally," he said, "because I've been empty a long time. I know what it means to lose. I couldn't let someone else suffer if I could help it." That night, something shifted. Their silence no longer felt like mistrust, but like comfort. Two lonely souls, drawn together not by choice, but by compassion. But their bond was soon tested. A group of ranchers rode through the prairie one afternoon, men James knew from town. They spotted the fire smoke and came close, rifles slung across their saddles. When they saw Ione, their eyes hardened with hatred. "What are you doing with her, James?" one sneered. "That's Apache. They've killed men. You'd best hand her over. James stood tall, his hand resting on his revolver. His voice was steady. She's under my protection. The men laughed bitterly, but James didn't flinch. You want to harm her, you'll go through me first. Tension crackled in the air. The men exchanged glances, their fingers brushing against their weapons. But something in James's eyes, unyielding, resolute, made them back down. One spat into the dirt. You're a fool, James. Don't expect us to save you when she turns on you. They rode away, leaving dust swirling in the wind. Ione had watched it all in silence. When the danger passed, tears filled her eyes. For the first time, she reached out and touched his hand. It was a gesture so simple, yet so profound, it shook James more than any fight ever had. In that moment, the fragile trust between them became something stronger, respect, gratitude, and the first spark of a bond that transcended the lines drawn by their people. Weeks turned into months. Ione healed, her limp fading with each passing day. She laughed sometimes now, a sound James had not known he missed until it returned to his camp. She taught him Apache words, showed him how to read the signs of nature, how to listen to the land rather than just survive it. And in return, he taught her how to ride his horse with ease, how to mend leather, how to shoot straight. Together, they built something neither had expected, not romance at first, not even friendship, but something more sacred, understanding. Humanity. The recognition that, under the wide prairie sky, they were not enemies, not symbols of war, but simply two souls trying to heal. By the time Ione was strong enough to return to her people, the thought of parting brought pain to them both. Will I see you again? James asked quietly. Ione looked at him, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and hope. The prairie is wide. But hearts, they remember. And with that, she was gone, walking into the horizon where the land met the sky. James stood alone again, but he was not the same man he had been when he found her in his trap. His heart was no longer empty. He had learned that compassion was stronger than fear, that humanity could bridge the deepest divides, and that sometimes, the most unexpected encounters leave the most lasting marks. Years later, when the prairie whispered through the tall grass and the stars stretched endless overhead, James would think of Ione. Not with regret, but with gratitude. For she had taught him something no gun, no ranch, no gold could give. That even in a world scarred by mistrust and war, kindness could create bonds strong enough to defy history. And so, beneath the wide prairie sky, a cowboy and an Apache woman shared a story not of enemies, but of respect, compassion, and an unspoken bond that time could never erase.